Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Metaworld news. This week we are bringing you headlines for the week ending 16th of June. 2019 for those archivists out there who are watching this in a somewhat delayed replay. Right, this program brings you a little bit of information about virtual reality, technology and things, haptics and stuff like that. Although our real focus tends to be on news from social virtual worlds, in other worlds you can enter, collaborate in, and entertain yourself, everything else, which can, of course, be on a simple computer screen with a 3D environment, or in many cases in one of those headset contraptions that puts you in the 3D space and allows you to bump into your walls and collide with doors and stuff like
That's
that
right.
because you can't see where you're going. Anyway, I'm Mal Burns. You can follow me on twitter.com/malburns. That's MALBUNS, or one word for Twitter's point of view. There's a second feed for this show, which is twitter.com/Metaworld News, again squashed into one. And I'm also joined next to me by James Outloud, who's busy plonking away on the switches in front of him that change our camera positions and stuff like that. And he's also prone to commenting from time to time. So welcome, James.
Oh yeah, commenting is a very dangerous thing, but I
I
keep it
know.
to a
Well, we're
minimum.
all like that. Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a commentator.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Although the other point, when I'm down the rabbit hole, of course, that becomes opinionator. When I'm totally lost underground somewhere, that
Oh,
becomes, yeah, I don't know what that becomes.
it's an
Terminator,
easy
mate.
transition. It's an easy
Yeah.
route to take.
I'm not so much a Terminator, but a Terminated. Fair enough. Right. Okay, well, as I said, headlines are headlines, and the first ones I'm going to be reading out for you are selected ones from my first feed, the twitter.com Mal Burns feed. Quite a quiet week this week, actually, but let's plow ahead anyway. Um, one of the things James has on screen is an extra feed of my desktop, so you can see the links that I'm talking about. At the moment, you can see a rather nice old picture that looks like it comes out of a gallery. In fact, I'm quite sure it does. It's not actually credited, so I don't quite know what it is, but it looks like a sort of Grecian-y sort of. Oh, it's definitely classical, isn't it?
Hmm.
Museum piece for sure. Anyway, that's actually is just to get us going because this illustration it goes with the Voices of VR podcast. Strictly speaking, Voices of VR is really going off on a few limbs. I posted this one in the week, number 770, because it's kind of interesting, but it doesn't really cover VR very extensively. But it's about ancient philosophy perspectives on time perception, reality, and the qualities of human experience. These are kind of issues that are often brought up when you're in VR or even virtual worlds, the otherworldly sense of presence and the alternative self and perception and all that sort of stuff. So this is really a kind of whether you want it thing. The interview here is with Dr. Peter Simpson, who's a professor of ancient philosophy at the City of University in New York, and the interview was done at a Philosophy of Time Society session. So yeah, go figure. It's tangential, I suppose, to Voices VR. I'm quickly going to flip back to another tab I've got open here, which is just slightly out of order. This was actually another Voices of VR. It's actually the next one, 771. And this one on June 13th is Indigenous VR and embodying the colonial super predator with lost. You developed.
Wow.
Oh, I can't read these things out. This is out of order. But this one actually is sort of back to VR, shall we say. There's a picture of what's going on. And here's a picture of the chap that they were is being interviewed. But I mean, really, I think Voices of VR could. I mean, they're obviously very fond of their headlines, but some of them are really coming a bit too convoluted for my liking. Yeah, can't we just have a simple headline? Interview with so and so about so and so. That's enough, thank you. Right. Anyway, both of these you can get at voicesofvr.com. That's Voices of VR squashed together into one word. The VR base is just the letters. Voicesofvr.com. And you'll probably find a few others there too that I haven't linked to directly. But those two I did choose as reasonably um, interesting sort of stuff. And yes, what is that? Oh, Unceded Territories VR trailer. Okay, well, I'm not going to watch that, but that is included. Um, that's included on at the bottom of the same post, which well, I'm not going to waste our time by screening it for you. Okay, I'm going to close that, and I'm going to close the other one. And here we go. VRscout.com. That's VR, the letters, then scout as in Boy Scout, all squashed together as one word. VRscout.com. And this was on June 12th, about 4 days ago. Something called Cat VR has announced Cat Loco VR locomotion system. Um, this is, again, you see the obligatory model posing in the headset and everything. This isn't the headset per se. The kind of stuff she's wearing, I guess, on her belt and arms and stuff like that, and her feet. These are the cat cat VR locomotion things. Cat loco. Um, right, it's cat loco. Um, in England here, we often well, we used to use the word loco to refer to somebody who's gone nuts. They've gone loco. But I suppose that's all a matter of perception, really. If she looks nuts when she's moving around. Anyway, June 10th, advanced locomotion tech manufacturer Cat VR introduced Cat Loco, a node-based tracking system that appears to fulfill the halfway point between traditional VR thumbstick locomotion and full-blown omnidirectional treadmill locomotion. So it sort of sits there a little bit in the middle, so to speak. And as I said, you can find this post at vrscout.com, and it does even have a video there. Let's have a look. Yeah, you can see it's a matter of strapping all these different things on, and now we get boring. It's becoming a shoot 'em up, isn't it? So that's enough of that. Thank you. um, moving on to what else have we got here? VL Scout again. .com. This was June 13th, the next day. Um, this is a review of parts of E3. Well, it's not exactly a conference, more of an exhibit, I think. E3 had no shortage of visually captivating installations on the show floor, and this was it. This is the favorite part of E3 for the writer here, Kylie Melnick, was a VR nightclub, and that is clearly not actually a VR nightclub. I think those are people on the operators on the show floor who are actually operating the nightclub in VR, and I think that is probably a nightclub on the screen behind. Anyway, a little review of that. Down and dirty on the show floor with Red Pill VR and Sensorium. Uh, okay, this looks like something you can possibly get at home. There are some comparisons here made with the Wave, which is a virtual world you can get to on the web using 3D live glasses. Well, I go and Oculus is and everything, and non-player characters doing lots of dancing. If you're interested, music, nightclubs, etc., then I'll leave you to check out prscout.com on that one. Very sort of particular kind of post there. Now, ooh, that word, Facebook. Yeah, well, Facebook researchers are building virtual spaces to improve AI and AR. They got two things going from Facebook Reality Labs, which used to be Oculus Labs, I think.
Hmm.
Something called Replica and something called AI Habitat. And judging from the photo here, it is sort of photo based, if you see what I mean. Apparently, the idea basically is you generate a virtual reality version of your own environment, and then you can walk around your real environment as a virtual reality environment. I don't quite know why you will want to do both, but maybe it's got to do with augmented reality. Um, Will virtual assistants be able to tell the difference between your living room and your kitchen, or even help you find a missing book or set of keys? Well, with embodied AI, which relies on data from physical surroundings, they soon might. Facebook has unveiled an open source simulation and data set it hopes will help researchers create more realistic augmented reality and virtual reality, and eventually virtual assistants that can actually learn about your physical surroundings. So there you go, there you go. The whole idea of this is if you lose your keys, you can go online to the virtual room that you're in and find out where your keys ought to be, even though quite possibly they may not be because the virtual room won't know you've lost them. Oh, but they may have a tracking on them. Yes, who knows? Who knows? I think you get the idea of this. Mind you, Facebook are intrusive enough and rich enough to throw money at anything. So whether that anything really comes to that remains to be seen. They've certainly got the financial weight to get something off the ground, if nothing else. All right. The International Society for Presence Research. Now, ain't this a nice name?
Hmm.
Their website is ispr.info. Might be worth putting in an RSS feed if you do such things. It's a I, I must have come across these people before now, but I haven't. Anyway, this is actually the name of the website, the International Society for Presence Research. And Otherworld, which is talking about here, is in East London. I'm in London here, so it's kind of local to me. I haven't been there. I might get an opportunity to pop in at some point. Um, uh, it's a new VR arcade, and it emphasizes the importance of the environment in which people experience presence. Um, uh, I've got a question, and there's no real answer to this, but it does ask me the question anyway. You've got a room like you see on the screen there, right? And it's equipped with VR, and the whole idea is about presence. But this is an out of home experience. So, presumably, the avatars you will be present with in the virtual environment are also real life people you'll be present with in the same environment that you're in where the virtual environment is being created from, if you see what I mean. So if you really want to be present with those people, aren't you already present without using VR? It's a bit that's an unanswerable question, I think. Anyway, this is called Otherworld, and it's underneath a converted railway arch, which a whole lot of things are these days.
Hmm.
I hope, I hope there's no railway on top to distress you with your immersion. Um, Multi-sensory immersive concept from the Dream Corporation, designed by an architectural firm called Red Deer, and it hosts 14 virtual reality rooms as well as a craft beer and cocktail bar and Pan Pacific inspired Poke Kitchen. Is that Pokemon or is that? I don't know. I have no idea what a Poke Kitchen is. It's a it's a Poke Kitchen, not a Poke Kitchen. Oh, if that's how to pronounce it, I don't know. I don't know. I'm talking about stuff I know absolutely
Yeah, and
nothing about here.
in that context, I would think of tapas would be would be good.
Oh, right, yes, it's some pan-specific
Yeah.
nibble. Okay, okay, nibbles and drinks included. Okay, yeah, each immersion room is a parallel universe of possibility featuring custom-built brews, the only in the world, the only and only ones in the world. I presume that's meant to mean, which is not true. Um, that are integrated with extra sensory effects that stimulate through heat, wind, rumble, and scent. Oh, nice one, scent. Always want to smell a vision.
Mm.
For the VR experience. Um, Climbing Mount Everest, fighting the zombie apocalypse. Yeah, as if they're not going to include that. Yeah, quite. Um, Physical design was intentionally pared back and made as minimal as possible to allow the light to form the main element of the interior. Um, This is talking about the real world environment as opposed to the virtual one, and that's about it. Okay, well, if you want to read more about this, do make a note of that address. It's ispr.info. So ispr.info. Yes, it's a four-letter suffix. They do have such things on the web these
Say,
days.
Mal,
So
a viewer has asked, Wildheart is watching and says that comments, do they have a spy double agent experience? That's a fun idea.
a spy double agent. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. If you have say 14 real people in there and then 14 people in 14 booths, you could have some kind of thing as to where each of the people in the booth in virtual reality spies on the 14 real people. And I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, what's the chap's name again?
Be fun. The account name is Wildheart.
Wildheart.
Yep.
Okay, welcome, Wildheart. Glad to see you there. Yes, I don't have the answer to that. They do have 14 booths, and each one's got a different sort of immersion in it. So, why not? I mean, to be honest, that's the sort of thing I would go for. Sort of take part in a, I don't watch zombie movies. I don't watch comedies too much. I don't, but I do watch spy movies. So, if I can go and pretend to be a spy character in a virtual simulation, then I'd probably go for it. I also enjoy hunts and things like that. So, who knows? That would sort of make a good theme there. Obviously, it doesn't seem like the sort of experience where there can be a real conclusion with rewards or anything like that. I suspect it's just a sensory experience rather than a sort of quest. But maybe a spy themed would be an idea.
Hmm.
I don't know. Anyway, let's get away from that. So I will let you know more if I ever end up in East London, which is not very far, but it is east as opposed to west where I am. And I'm lazy. walk walk out the door into the high street is enough for me. Otherwise, I have to take the tube and the claustrophobia and all the
Hmm.
rest of it.
Hmm.
Anyway, I will let you know if I ever get there. Same as many things that open up in London here. Right, moving on. VR and microscopy, or microscopy, however you pronounce it, helps scientists to see inside diseases. Uh, now, I don't know whether this is deliberate, but if you can see the subtitle of this, it can show you details you wouldn't catch in 2D. I don't know whether that was deliberate or not. Obviously, diseases are things we catch, and we usually do it in real world 3D. So that may be a deliberate or not deliberate play on words. Anyway, here's a scientist investigating diseases in virtuality. Um, Basically, I mean, it is the same as we have cameras that can film in 3D now. But we've had cameras for a long while, and we've had microscopes sorry, scopes for a long while, but not necessarily ones that can capture in 3D. So everything is kind of changing. The idea is, if you are, yeah, the chemist puts a sample of a virus, something on a little, one of those glass plates and puts it under the microscope and zooms in and sees where all the little molecules or whatever they are colliding with each other and what's eating which ones are eating the others and all that stuff and figure out how the disease is working. Well, presumably this simply extrapolates that microscope experience into a 2D thing where you can actually wander around, and that must be a bit like a zombie apocalypse. Actually, the scientists can wander around and actually see a 3D um, micro coming to eat him. But you get the idea. You get the idea. The more information you can feed into the head of the researcher, the more likely the researcher is to come up with some kind of conclusion. It may not be a cure, but it will certainly be a conclusion. So it lets scientists walk inside the cells. That's the word I should have been using, by the way, cells, not molecules or anything else. They've combined virtuality with expansion microscopy, which grows samples by over 100 times to explore cell data that would otherwise be too complex to handle. Once the cells have been imaged, labeled, and compiled into data, a custom techniques turns the 2D info into a 3D environment. And then they go on to say that this approach could be vital to medicine and et cetera, for the various reasons. And yeah, Carnegie Mellon University are involved with this. And as you can see, there's a video you can watch at that site if you're particularly interested. So the site you want for this one is engadget.com. You can see the logo at the top of the screen there on the little insert we're showing. engadget.com. And this post itself was, when was it? Oh, it's only 15 hours ago, according to my thing. Um, let me. Oh yes, yes, that would have been this morning. I picked this one up actually, so there we go. Now, surprisingly, that is actually the end of the items I've got this week from the my main Malburn's Twitter feed. But we do actually have quite a few this week from the other one, which is twitter.com Metaworld News. And most largely, these are thanks to Maria Koloff at Hypergrid Business. Um, the same Maria that is on the title screen of this show, even though she hasn't actually been on the show with us for a year or so. Anyway, she is posting quite a bit at Hypergrid Business this week. I'm going to start off with. I've loaded these in sort of chronological order. So the latest one actually is a list of the most popular hypergrid worlds. Um, I noticed somewhere down the bottom here is our own grid here for Metaworld, in fact, which well, you are welcome to teleport in here and get copies of things and look around if you want, but it's not advertised as a public world at
Hmm.
all. So, nevertheless, I seem to be on the list. So there you go. There are an awful lot, as you can see as I'm scrolling down here. Endlessly down to the bottom of the page there. I don't know. There's no numbers by these, so exactly where virtual RBM comes in a number list, I don't know. It looks like about 250, or maybe there could even be more on that list. As you can see, it's a
Hmm.
long scroll. So anyway, you can find this at Hypergrid Business, all one word, .com. And it's slash statistics will probably get you there a little bit quicker. Um, the next one came, these all came up in a pretty group. The latest statistics are up there, and Maria has done a job here of sort of rounding them up, really. Number of regions are up, user stats down, but mostly due to reporting issues, and there were some database problems. Again, this is just a kind of summary. Um, 1,500 standard regions increase in the number of regions, but that seems to be regions as opposed to grids. Um, uh, talk a little bit of talk about OpenSim. The drop this month was actually due to the fact that Tag Grid, which had over 1,500 users, did not report numbers, um, etc., etc. Um, Yep. Well, if you want the specifics, I reckon you can actually go there. As usual with Maria, you get a nice graph. So if you're a fan of statistics in pie chart form, there you go. Up and down and up and down and up and down. And no, that's not a graph for the yo-yo grid. That is a general graph. But there again, the rhythm is similar. Um, Stats don't include most of the grids running on Outworld's Dreamworld grid. So I don't know, for example, know whether Metaworld will be included in that because we do use Outworld's system, not Dream Grid, but their other system. Um, she points out that Outworlds has its own database of grids as well. And where are we? More PR. Top 25 grids by active users. Well, you certainly won't find a Studio Grid on this. OS Grid in the lead. Greek Life. Well, Greek Life always seems to manage to come really high, though, um, whenever I've been there, there's hardly anybody around. Although I think it's Nick, Greek Nick or something from Greek Life, or it seems to be online an awful lot himself. DigiWorlds, not surprisingly, coming in at 3. OS Grid is not surprising at number one because it is sort of the original grid, and a lot of developers and old timers have never seen fit to move anywhere else. Aquarium, increasingly popular these days. Metropolis, Theta Worlds, Eureka World, Foundation Grid. That's at number eight. That's a sort of new one on me really. It's ahead of Kitely, which is at number nine. Party Destination Grid at number 10. Well, I guess that's what it's all about, coming and having a party. Good, I suppose, to see the breadth of activity on OpenSim and the Hypergrid coming in here, because you've obviously got educational grids, you've got Craft World at 19, but we're getting newer grids that are very specific things like Party Destination, which I presume bringing people in, maybe to their own grid or maybe via the Hypergrid, to actual parties, which really sort of a bit like the Second Life type model, really, where people log on and they don't really want to build, they just buy things and do a bit of interior decorating and go to parties and gigs and basically have fun. Anyway, you've got the Social Mouse is in at 23. That's interesting. That's quite. I wasn't sure they were still around. They've gone very quiet. Right. Gainers are Neverworld, Sagrarian, Vartown Grid, Outworlds, and Breathe in Freedom. That's one I will have to look up and add to our database by the look of it. And yep, okay, we got the top grids by land area, as you can see. Yep, clearly I'm not going to sit here reading all that out. So go to hypergridbusiness.com and you can get all that information as you uh, want it, so to speak. Right. Um, Right. We'll be back to Hypergrid Business in a second. Meanwhile, this is Sciencespace's blog. So it's blog.sign.space. So Sciencespace in the on the web, as it were, is two separate worlds. Blog.sign SINE dot space, as in outer space. Um, this is all over now. It was just a thing they held. Their staff actually were quite fun. Hopefully, they might film this. It was on Thursday. It's their staff were taking part in this game and called Greedy Greedy, and Adam Frisbee, Rowan Freeman, and DG well, along with others. They were in Club Greedy, which is a new venue on the Sciencebase platform. And as you can see, this is a bit like a table where they sit around playing cards, except they don't play cards, they play greedy. And I can't scroll to the bottom of this one, that's a shame.
Hmm.
And they've got dice on the table. Whatever. So a little plug for Science Base there. All the staff do appear to be back from, I think it was LA, where they were doing massive promotions and stuff. So they're back home in the UK and Australia, basically. So they're playing a game of Greedy Greedy to celebrate, or they were, if you see what I mean. Anyway, moving on. RoadToVR.com. Right, it looks like I need to do a little bit of tweaking here um, to get this post to fit in to fit in
Oh.
the browser. Yes, some of the posts come up a bit odd and have to be shrunk to fit in. Right. The studio by social VR app Rec Room has raised 24 million US dollars in funding, which I guess is not Facebook money, but it's nothing to be laughed at. This post is Road to VR. That's all one word. Road to the letters TO, that is, and then VR, the letters VR. Road2VR.com. The only thing from them this week, oddly enough, well, note, Ben Lamb reporting. Now, Rec Room is a social virtual world, so that's why it comes under our sort of Metaworld News feed. Against Gravity, the studio behind popular social VR game Rec Room has raised the extra money in venture capital across two investment rounds. Speaking to TechCrunch, Against Gravity says it has raised Okay, I don't really need to read a paragraph that says the same thing twice, do I? Right. It's big news, which is Against Gravity has been increasingly focusing Rec Room around user-generated content and ensuring the title is available on a wide range of headsets and shortly mobile devices too, allowing friends to connect easily across VR platforms. Which is a point of significant friction between most VR platforms. Now, I think by VR platforms here, they mean um, uh, device platforms. So they want
Hmm.
to be in headsets, they want to be on the desktop, and they want to be on mobile, and they want it all to interconnect. What they are not talking about, I'm pretty sure, is no, you are not going to be able to teleport out of Rec Room to Second Life or Open Sim or anything like that. Their meaning of the word platform is not the software platform, the game engine. It's they're talking about the version of Rec Room on various devices. Additionally, the company's emphasis on family-friendly aesthetic gives it a more general appeal than something like VR Chat, which is another social VR which serves up subculture vibes. Does it indeed? Subculture vibes. Okay, fair enough. So, um, Red Room is increasingly recognized from the VR community as the top social VR, oh, as a top social VR, sorry, shouldn't have said the. It's still tiny, but may represent a growing threat to Facebook. Oh, here, it's still tiny, but may represent a growing threat, right, to Facebook's messy social VR approach, which is fragmented even between the company's own headsets.
Right.
Well, uh, uh, true word never said, I guess. Um, right. Okay. You got the gen there. If you want to read it. Oh, Box VR, no developer, but I think that is strictly games, so we don't really include that. Okay, put that away, and we are back on Hypergrid Business. Yeah, four of them here now, actually. These are strictly speaking not stats so much as articles. Again, Maria, she's got an article on where to host your next OpenSim grid. I like the way she says next, as if you already have one and are therefore going to move
Hmm.
somewhere else or open another one somewhere. Yeah, it's really going through, the task of you actually hosting your own grid. Now that could, yeah, if you all you want is an actual region, there's still nothing stopping you hosting your own grid with just one region in it. And in fact, our regions here are actually one region. I think it was 25, but they're what's known as one VAR region, which is just the size of 25 regions, standard regions, that is. Um, so she has a little picture here, which is actually a private virtual grid, which is on the Kitely platform. And she basically goes on what the hosting services can offer, etc., etc. And she covers Dreamland Metaverse, for example, SleetomX, DigiWorlds, who are very popular, Greek Life again, I keep forgetting they host as well. Something called Your Sim Spot, Olivera Virtual Lands, Gevolution, Tomahost, and Kitely. What she doesn't actually really mention there is the possibility of using something like Outworlds to actually host your own grid. In other words, that's where these places are places you might grow online if you want them to host a grid for you and possibly even manage it. So it's down to renting server space for your grid basically, and possibly renting or paying for additional services in terms of maintenance and the back end. But it's a nice little roundup there. If all you want is something very small, like a private virtual grid, like in this picture, I personally would suggest you look to something like Outworlds. That's Outworlds spelled with a Z instead of an S. You'll find that online, and that just allows you to download the OpenSync client and install it as a server on any old desktop computer. And as long as you don't want to actually host events with a lot of people, you can get yourself and one or two friends into a nice, fast environment just running on your own desktop. You do need to keep the server open, of course, so your friends have got somewhere to go. But it can be more practical, especially if you're on a budget. The doing it that way involves a budget of zero. I mean, other than your internet charges, your ISP, etc., etc. And of course, if you do that, you probably need to check. Not so much these days, but it's still possible you might have an ISP that objects to you running a server. So you should always check for that as well. Right, moving on to Hypergrid Business again. So, Maria decided also to try out Kitely's virtual private grids. Now, Kitely are a big name in the hyperverse, so to speak. Um, they have a grid of their own called Kitely. Its operating model is a bit different from others because regions go idle when there's nobody on it, but they boot up really fast the moment they're needed. And Kindly doesn't really think of regions, it thinks of regions as worlds, and therefore it sees itself as a collection of worlds. Um, but that's semantics, really. However, they've rolled out something recently at the beginning of the year called the Virtual Private Grid Service, and she does a review of it. Um, it really is just, it gives you more back-end control and stuff like that. And obviously, they do a lot of work for you. So it's as opposed to downloading your own software or going without worlds or some other version of Sim on a stick or something. For educational grids and things, this is quite useful and fairly affordable, for example. So to find out more about it, you better read that article. I'm not really up to reading it out for you. Right, moving on again. Maria again. How to choose your OpenSim grid type. Right. This is a slightly different from the one before the last. Uh, this is more about the kind of grid you might want to be on. Um, whether you're a standard region, VAR regions, etc., and whether you want to rent regions and stuff like that. Um, she actually starts off here about mini grids. When she had Hyperica, which is now run by Outworlds, it was a mini grid hosted by Dreamland Metaverse. Um, it's now an Outworlds grid, although it is hosted by Outworlds as opposed to somebody's own computer, as it were. Um, and then you've got Diva Distra of OpenSim, and she points out the differences running your own full grid and everything else. This is not really so much the um, run your own for free. Right, this is the OS Grid OpenSim installer. Um, for a very small fee, you can use Metropolis, and for nothing, I think still you can use OS Grid where you actually install the grid on your own computer, a bit like the Outworlds option I mentioned, but it's then linked online to either Metropolis or OS Grid, which means that people can actually get to it as a sort of sub-region of those two big grids. So basically it just saves them having to log into an IP address that's yours because it's synced with the big grid. Um, then a bit about hardware. I'm just looking here. Okay, Fred Buckhausen's full grid thing called Dream Grid, which we mentioned previously. She mentions here too. Uh, there are actually two. There is Dream Grid and there is Dream World. I particularly use Dream World. Um, Dream Grid is more geared to this. The big difference is that Dream Grid is probably the version. If you actually want to host on your own computer, your own grid, but have more, commercial things in mind for it, then you would probably want to go for Dream Grid, and maybe that would involve spanning across various servers and things like that. Um, the Dream World from Outworlds is really just one grid on one server, and it's limited in size and abilities depending on if you've got a good machine. Lots of RAM, hard disk space, possibilities are endless. But one of the ideal things about Outworlds is, and Sim on a stick is you can actually load this on an old computer you've got lying around at home that's actually no good for your word processing anymore, but it will still run an open sim server, which essentially is just data going up to the internet. So lots of pros and cons there, and Maria has a roundup. And I rather wish she was here, actually. She's always better at rounding up her own stuff than
Mm-hmm.
I am.
Yep.
Right, okay,
And she's
and the
great at
final.
opinionating.
Yes, yes, she
When you're
is,
talking about
exactly. I
good
mean,
opinionating, yep.
who knows me in the rabbit hole when I've got Maria by my
Right, right.
side? Yes. Anyway, her final post. Again, all these are written by Maria this week. Utopia Sky Grid is to hold an art fair this summer. Now, I've got a vague feeling we might have mentioned this last week. I can't quite remember. This has been advertised by Utopia Sky Grid in our Discord channel. Um, Quick word of plus thing, you can, if you have Discord, you should check out a server we got called Hypergrid Explorers and Creators. If you look up Discord, if you haven't got it already, Google, you can download it, but you can also search for groups, and Hypergrid Explorers and Creators will get you to us. Um, Basically, we have channels and for a lot of the main hypergrid grids and sort of general news and stuff like that, including the Twitter feeds I mentioned earlier. So you can get everything in one place. It takes a bit of getting used to because there's a lot of information in different channels, different servers, etc. But it's also a very worthy alternative to Skype for audio and video calling and indeed text messaging. It's sort of the top half is a sort of Skype alternative, and the bottom half is a section of almost unlimited servers to do with virtual worlds, games, software, all sorts of things you can join the service for. Anyway, moving from that, Utopia Sky Grid has a channel in our server, but they also have a Discord server of their own, which I think you would simply find by going Utopia Sky. Uh, Sky with an E on the end as opposed to the blue stuff above you, and no P in the middle as opposed to Microsoft's thing. It's a Utopia Sky
Okay.
grid, and they're holding an art fair in the summer, and a little bit more about it there. All again at hypergridbusiness.com. And we are there. We're at the end
Oh my.
of
Okay.
this week's news, so to speak. So we're a bit ahead of schedule because we didn't have quite as much as before. But who knows? Who knows how near
Well,
is this program to finishing? Well, it
that's
depends
all
on what
right.
James has got to say for one thing.
Well,
What do you
actually,
think, James?
and not dependent on me, we've got a question from the YouTube chat, again
Oh,
from
wonderful.
Wildheart, about what do you consider a good place to have just general discussions about virtual worlds? I was thinking of like some of the places on OS Grid, but that is already in one particular virtual world. So,
Yeah.
things to, questions about OpenSim, Second Life, Sansar, all the virtual
It
worlds.
is a it is a problem because like our hypergrid explorers and creators would technically be a good one because the idea is, it includes everything to do with the hypergrid, which is hundreds, not thousands of grids.
Hmm.
Um, But inevitably, that's one thing I noticed when I started it. Inevitably, all the individual grids and things who initially thank you for adding them or whatever think, "Oh, this is a good idea," and they take ownership of Discord and make their own server. What do you end up with? You end up with a lot of servers for a lot of different grids, all occupied by people who live on residents of those grids, which is fair enough. But as soon as people start hanging out, unlike me, most people just have the one or two Discord servers they hang out on. And if they're hanging out on a server, which is like an advanced chat room forum, made for their own grid, then they're excluding themselves from the conversation about all the other grids on our server. But then again, conversely, our server is also limited because we only cover the hypergrid exploration and creators, which it covers a lot of grids, but it doesn't include other platforms like Hypergrid, Sciencebase, Rec Room was mentioned there, VR Chat, and it's very hard, even for me, to actually draw a, a it was definitely a grey line, where something is a social virtual world and where it has the potential to be and where it's actually something completely different, like a game. Um, it's not easy to answer that question. Um,
Scattered,
there
it's
is
scattered
what
around quite a bit, Yeah.
It is. I mean, one that I used to be quite fond of, but I don't really know if it solves the problem, is a channel and a TV, video machinima thing like ours called Endgame. Um, and that was more, less news, but more sort of discussion. But clearly, the mechanics of having multiple voices on a discussion on your Twitch or whatever they did it on um, stretches stretches their powers a little bit. It also depends on whether you want that general discussion, um, an avenue for it, or whether you want it to be in a virtual environment. And I think the answer is that if you're going to be in a virtual environment, you're always going to find the bias is towards, if not the region and the near environment the venue is on, at least the platform it's on.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, truly.
any discussion in a venue in Sciencebase is probably going to be focused on Sciencebase. You do get events, for example, Sciencebase have the Delphi talks, which has included sort of luminaries from all over the place that are vaguely connected with VR and theatre and all sorts of things, that aren't directly related to Sciencebase. And of course, the idea there is that Sciencebase gets publicity by putting on those events. High Fidelity, until recently when they changed direction a bit, also did some similar things by having people in there for discussions or performances. But obviously, it's a way of getting your platform noticed if getting big names in there. Um, so I don't really know. I mean, one thing I miss, oddly enough, is in the old Second Life platform, where many years ago, when people actually thought Second Life was the future of the metaverse, even though it's
Right,
a,
right.
a wall corporate garden, and actually is in no way a future metaverse. Um, but there used to be a group and indeed a television show called Metanomics. And my hub in Second Life at the time was one of the partners for this show. And what we basically did is it built up a very big following, and my venue and about 20 others were sort of partners, and there was the main venue where the show was held and filmed. And when the show was on, you could choose which venue you went to watch it, and it wasn't just you weren't actually watching the video on the projection screen. You were actually well, you were, but the text, the audience text between all these 20 venues was linked. So somebody watching it at Metaworld Studio, somebody watching it over Orange's facilities or in my Meta Hub or somewhere else, we could all read the chat between all of the viewing venues at once. So that actually grew into a community of hundreds of people, and their offline groups and things were really focused a lot on general chat because the program itself was almost about the future of VR and the metaverse and everything else. So the audience members and all the things that surrounded it became very much a chat room, about the future of everything VR, virtual. Unfortunately, that show's gone the way of ways, and the group, even in Second Life, is barely active anymore. Somebody posted it once in a blue moon with a link or something, but it was of its time, and there's. I look back on it with great, warmth, shall we say,
Yeah, yeah, it
but
was great.
unfortunately, it is not there anymore, and I can't think off the top of my head of something similar. Um,
I agree. It's
I am
almost
quite,
like to get a big perspective, it's almost you're talking about a website or discussion group that's about futurism in general. I think, once you get into a specific platform, there's good discussion, but it
yeah,
is all very fragmented right now and targeted to particular platforms.
I think so. And taking this show for example, I mean, once upon a time, this was all about hypergrid grids and sims and places to visit, and well,
Right.
in world review particularly. But gradually the volume of news each week is more about sort of VR in general. It was very easy. I'm sure if Maria popped back in, we'd probably be doing it again. Is to
Mm,
review about 100 different headsets a week.
right. Right.
I guess a whole different ball game. But I find, I mean, I personally find it difficult to find people to talk to myself, informally, as it were, um, who have the same worldview, maybe the wrong word, overview as me, because I look at all this stuff and I see commonalities and threads. It's all like sub chapters of a great big plot.
Mm.
Not a bad plot, not a
Right,
bad
right.
plot. You know what I mean? Of a continuing story. And, I think of, I mean, I'm very fond, I don't know whether it pans out, Will Burns's metaphors for the metaverse, where you've got the metaverse, which is like one gigantic universe, and then you've got meta galaxies, which are collections of virtual worlds. Then you've got virtual worlds, which are really worlds rather than regions, and then although regions come into the worlds, and then you've got metadata, which of course traditionally means something else completely. But then when you actually think of metadata as the underlying layer, and then the meta worlds as being kind of different actual worlds, and maybe the meta galaxies as being different platforms, and the metaverse as being the thing that hooks everything up together to either a small or greater degree, depending on what the
Hmm.
platforms underneath it are.
Yep.
And I like thinking that way. And when I read news about a new haptic device, I was thinking, I made it. I don't think does that work with my Oculus? Well, I haven't got an Oculus, so I don't really care. I think is that device going to be useful in the future? You hear me talk about being very cynical about headsets on this show, for
No,
example. On
no,
on
not
the other
you.
thing,
That was sarcasm.
no, no comment. I know it was. Thank you, James. Because I want to see a pair of glasses and I want them to plug into my iPhone. So, just as headphones, you can plug in to put audio straight into your ears instead of listening to the iPhone on your desk, then I want some glasses that I can plug in that replace the screen of my phone, if you see what I mean. Or it could be an iPad or whatever. So they need to be wrapped around. They'll need to block out a lot of light and stuff. But basically, it's screen technology that goes in front of my eyes. I don't want a headset where I'm, hauling around the entire computer on my head. Even if it's a lightweight computer, by the time it's put in the headset and everything else, it is not lightweight. I don't care what you say. A cigarette packet is my idea of lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
Not a
Yep.
foot, no, not a leather football. Yes, with a hole in it.
Right. So Mel,
Um,
I'm wondering
yeah.
another way to think about it. Thinking from the creative building side, it seems to me that something like for no cost Blender or Unity are things that people can create and then import into different platforms. What do you think of some groups around
Um,
those technologies?
those I think you have.
Hmm.
Um, Something like Unity and Blender are huge.
Yep. Yep.
You can find Discord channels, forums, news groups, the whole works for users of those platforms. But remember, these are back channels used by very large groups, but essentially creators.
Right. Movie makers all the way down
Or
to
builders, movie
experimenters.
makers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're people with a particular skill. I mean, I, for example, I read a lot of channels involved with broadcasting and television in general. Right, they would be of no interest to people who just do shows like this, but for me, they're of interest because this show is part of a greater sort of concept that those things cover.
Yep.
So I do follow, developments in broadcasting and in filming techniques and things. There's a whole gamut of stuff that perks my interest back from the old days almost. Um, but I think I do apologise. What's our listener's name called who asked this question?
Wildheart?
Wild Heart. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Wild Heart. I mean, my ability with names is remembering anything. Wild Heart, Wild Heart, Wild Heart. Okay, I should try. I should try. I think what Wild Heart was asking was particularly in the VR realm, and by VR I mean virtual worlds rather than just the genre of virtual reality, which is something different now. So VW, I suppose. Um, I would certainly like to see something. I'd be the first to attend. I mean, um, I think some of the most memorable conversations I've had, and they haven't been extensive groups, but I will be pottering around in Sciencebase, and there'll be Rowan and Adam Frisbee from Sciencebase itself, and maybe a few other people that got in together for a little natter and sitting in on something like that. You end up having a quite broad natter, about the state of virtual worlds and things like that. The same with, the likes of Philip Rosedale and High Fidelity and some other people in High Fidelity. You could get together in a small unscheduled group, and it's not about the developers, it's not about events or anything else. It's just free form talk about what's on people's minds and what the future of life, the universe, and everything is.
Hmm.
You do get a few of these. I think it's the SL Inquirer, which is an in-world magazine. They uh, they do run a couple of events, for example, once a week, and they're clearly quite big discussion groups that are held in worlds. But obviously, their remit seems to go way beyond what we're discussing. One week it will be the future of uploading your memories into hyperspace, or sort of exploring Venus, or they go with discussions that take their fancy and tend to be on rather a grand scale. Um, so yeah, these things do exist. I mean, I think maybe the one of the problems is like problems with events in general. Where do you go to find out all about them? I mean, we try and include an event stream on the Discord server for prominent things happening across the hypergrid, but they don't include Second Life, for example. They don't include High Fidelity, and they don't include Sciencebase, let alone VR chat, Rec Room, and all the rest of it. Um, and I think, in response to what James said, I think maybe it probably is, for discussion on the web. I mean, developers in OpenSim, for example, they the only place they seem to talk, and they do to foot, is IRC. And unfortunately, they do far too
Oh,
much of it. I
right,
mean,
right.
I follow their IRC channels, and there's two of them, and the same stuff gets posted to both, and some people just go on, and then they start arguments, and oh, please save us from developers in that respect. Anyway, um, so yeah, I mean, Discord can be used, right, like an IRC channel. In fact, one of the reasons Discord was founded was for users of games who used to use things like IRC but needed something a bit more robust. So you've now got audio and video, phone calls, and instant messaging, plus endless supply of groups. Um, I would love to hear personally. So if you find anything, or if anybody wants to do it, let me know. If there was going to be such a discussion, it'd be the first thing I'd want to join. I'd be much more keen to join a discussion like that once a week than a discussion on the future of OpenSim, or the
Mm,
future of High Fidelity,
yeah, Mel,
or
I've put
yeah,
up the Discord link to join the Hypergrid Explorers and Adventurers, and so if
very
there's a
very
place to
good.
jump,
Yeah,
right? And then,
it's worth.
well, Hart comments, does IRC still exist?
Oh, it does. It does. I don't
I
think it
know
will
the
ever.
sympathy.
I,
Yeah.
I don't think it will ever go away. To be honest, I mean, I actually use a program on Windows called Franz, or there's another one called Station, um, which. Oh, sorry. Stop sharing. Sorry, I'm just killing our auxiliary feed because we don't need it anymore. Right. Um, Oh yeah, which allows me to have Discord, Slack, IRC, Plurk, LinkedIn,
Mm.
Telegram, Facebook Messenger, Skype, Twitter. All these services I have in one program, and they're on separate tabs vertically, and I just click on the icon to switch between them. Usually I'm in Discord by default, but I have a version of that which is also available on the desktop, and it's called uh, IRC Cloud, it's called. So
Oh
it's
my.
IRC and then another C for cloud. And it's fairly concise. And, I'm permanently logged into High Fidelity, Hypergrid, OpenSim, and OpenSim Dev. They're the only four I'm logged into. And Hypergrid never has anything now. They've got a Discord channel. The Hypergrid one, um, let me see, the people keep popping in and out, but nobody says anything. The last comment anybody ever made was on May the 30th, and it's somebody saying hi and nobody replying, kind of thing. But on the OpenSim and the OpenSim dev ones, you get a nice thing. It resembles Slack. You just get the whole commentary, nice, clear. You can color code it if you want it, and you can read through it. So it's a good, accessible way of getting IRC. But as I say, I think most IRC seems to be a very good place for like elitist groups who want to keep themselves hidden because you got to know the address and what
Mm-hmm.
where they're on Freenode, etc. to find them. Discord's a bit easier to find people, but I think in terms of usability, Discord's and its like actually have taken over from IRC. If it's a private group you want to be part of, then if you're not using Discord, you use Slack.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Slack would probably be the best. There is a Slack group which is actually for oh god, I can't remember what it's called. It's rather sparse these days, but it was actually set up as a discussions group to involve with virtual worlds, virtual reality, and it was non-specific. In other words, the idea was all people from platforms working on different platforms.
And I feel like Slack's gone to
Stuff.
a paid model as opposed to a free model. I'm trying to
No,
remember.
there's still a free
Is there?
version. I mean,
Okay.
you can do a lot more with a paid model.
Right.
Basically you're restricted to a small team in the free version, and you can only have so many integrations. But um, unless you're really running a big company or a big group, you wouldn't really want. I don't think there's any point in having to pay Slack. Um, there was some other program I had at one point where I think it was called Close, which was um, email management and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And I remember coughing up money for a paid version because it was going to offer me a whole load more. The moment I got the paid version, I wanted rid of it, because the free version did everything I wanted and it was really easy to use. The paid version ended up being a convoluted sort of mess of stuff I was never going to use. It was sort of, it looked like a Microsoft product, um, convoluted to the point of
Hmm.
unusability, um, if I may say so.
You may.
um,
It's your
yeah, I
program.
don't
You
know.
may say it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say. I don't really know what to suggest to Wild Heart. I mean, I'm sort of thinking while I'm talking. I'm trying to think. Isn't there something out there that I've got and I've missed, But invariably, all the stuff I use is stuff that I choose to use and configure in various ways. And I don't have anything on any of my desktops. It's like an instant chat room. I mean, if I want to convene a meeting with people, a small group of people, then I would use Discord or Skype to do it. Both of which offer you, text, audio, or video. Um, it's not the same as in a virtual world, but there again, if that conference involves people who are, if I want Adam Frisbee from Sciencebase, um, Ebby Altberg from Second Life, Philip Rosedale from High Fidelity, and say Fred Buckhausen, from OpenSim, and I want them all in a conversation. We're not going to spend the next year deciding whether we're going to meet in high fidelity science based open sim or second life.
Hmm.
You will go for the neutral territory, and so the chances of something that fully embracing happening in on anybody's particular platform. Oh yeah, I won't say they're impossible, but they're fairly remote. If I wanted to convene those four people for a show in open sim here, for example, I mean, it would be almost difficult to do. You've got to tie them all down on a date, and then you'd have to convince them that no, their platform is not the best for this. I want you to use mine because I'm set up for filming it or something. It's obstacles all the way, and it's a problem we have with virtual worlds. Full stop. And that is that unlike the web, there is no sense of underlying protocols or interoperability. Um, in the modern world, if the World Wide Web was built today, somebody would trademark it before it was built. So they owned everything. I mean, the way Facebook is trying to do by Facebook wants to replace the internet eventually. It may still run on the internet background, but they don't want you to go anywhere else but their platform, which is why they're so keen on 3D and everything else. Um, that was not the spirit in which the internet was built, or at least the World Wide Web. And every web page you ever see, things look very different. Some of the big, bouncy, flashy, whiz-bang sites. Others are really boring, old-fashioned text sites with barely a GIF picture inside. But they all subscribe to the common protocol. You only need one web browser to get at all those things. Occasionally, something like Flash would have come along where you need to download a plugin to view it, but then again, you could get the plugin for every browser. So, it was a one off sort of thing. Now, we just don't have anything like that for virtual worlds. I mean, one of the reasons people are quite keen on virtual worlds on the web is that, in fact, it's returning us to the web, which is ubiquitous. Everybody can get to the web. And especially if you can come up with something that, like Mozilla's, WebVR, that doesn't even require a plugin of any sort, to actually build the constructs on the page, then you can put virtual worlds, on a web page, and then it only needs to be a location. And if people want to teleport to another location, then what they do is they type in another web address, which takes them to another 3D environment on the web. And of course, Mozilla with Mozilla hubs and things, I think the idea is that you'll ultimately have one address that you can go to, and then you'll have the whole choice of all these virtual environments that are actually running in on the web, HTML5 based probably, and WebGL, all the various technologies that go for that. But of course, it becomes a different thing. It becomes a 3D experience, a bit like an installation of which there are many instances and they're all on the web. But there won't be any underlying structure that's an alternative to the web. It would simply be using the web to do it, and you might even get if they interoperated, you'd actually get silly things that would happen, which might be inadvisable. For example, if I go to a location on the web and then I was able to tell him, does a teleport not involve a teleport at all? Does it involve a web link that opens a new tab at the side of the world you've got open? So you've got two worlds side by side on a tab, and it'd probably be like any tabs these days. When you get more than enough tabs open, you start closing them because they slow you down immensely. So I don't know whether that will work or not. I mean, but the web itself is such a problem these days. I mean, Tim Berners-Lee is busy, trying to reinvent aspects of it so individual users, access the web with their own pod, and your own pod keeps encrypted information about you. And basically, it tries to clean up the web.
we've
At one point they were going to build Web 2,
right, right. We've ventured in a
but
deep topic here, I think.
we have indeed. Yeah, and yes, how did I get this far into the rabbit hole as usual? If you, I think Wildheart, you're a regular listener to this show, so you know my references to it. I'm prone to jumping down rabbit holes and not coming out until James reminds me. Yes, it is a deep topic, and you've got an extra half-hour show out of me.
we used to talk.
He says,
We used to talk on this show and on In-World Review about thinking OpenSim might be a common denominator, but I'm not of that opinion anymore.
no. Um, I actually still think it's the most durable. It has, apart from walled gardens like Second Life, which in a way is a forerunner, although a corporate one for OpenSim. OpenSim is still probably the bigger. If you want active users at any point in time, you'll find more on OpenSim if you know where to look, scattered across the grids on the hypergrid than you will on high fidelity or Sciencebase. Um, we have more space on Open Simulator on the hypergrid than even on Second Life,
Yeah.
though there's not as many active users. So it depends, so there's more space and more stuff happening on the hypergrid than there is in Second Life. But Second Life has more actual users because they're more concentrated on things like watching bands mime to music and saying, "Yay, aren't you good?" Um, the particular type of entertainment or something. So it swings and roundabouts. There's worlds for everything. But we often thought of James mentioned Unity and earlier, for example, and Blender. I mean, people work in Unity and people work in Blender working on 3D modeling and stuff. And actually, it doesn't matter whether it's Second Life or OpenSim or High Fidelity or Science Based. There are ways of bringing what you do from those authoring platforms into all four of those world platforms, and
Hmm.
no doubt endless others as well, including Mozilla's web. Mozilla hubs on the web. Um, so if you're a creator, there's places to gather for creative talk. Actually, and of course, if I build a replica of, I don't know, the Houses of Parliament. I don't know why I want to do that,
Oh
but
my. Yep.
if I did, using Unity and then a little touching up in Blender, and I got a final compact package, I would probably be in Unity, and I will probably save it in, it'd be an identical copy, but it'd be in about three formats, like the equivalent of being in Photoshop and saving a JPEG, a GIF, a Photoshop file, and a TIFF file. Same picture, just a different format for saving. And on a website, you post a JPEG. On a fancy thing or something, you've got use for the GIF. Low, very low res. Or for full fidelity, you've got the TIFF file or the Photoshop master. So it would be the same with 3D. I'd save a 3D format that I could import into high fidelity, or another 3D format I can import into OpenSim, or another 3D format I can import into Sciencebase. So the end result of the object I import will be the same across all the platforms. And one thing I've been trying to find out as a future possibility um, is if I'm not good on the learning curve for new things these days. I'm just a bit too old for it, I'm afraid.
I'm there
I
with
don't
you.
pick things,
Yep.
I don't pick things up the way I used to, and I just had to realise that basically. Um, but what I would theoretically like to be able to do is to create, say, something made of mesh, like an entire TV studio, for example, and then upload it to Sciencebase, High Fidelity, Rec Room even, and Mozilla Hubs, and here in OpenSim
Hmm.
and whatever, and it will be an identical environment, give or take slight platform differences, in whichever version you went to. So it'd be a bit like an exhibit, like a sculpture, except that and I post it in all the different worlds. So it depends. Doesn't matter what platform you're using, what world you're in, you can come and visit it, but there'll be slight differences. But what I'm more interested in doing, because interoperability is my thing, is wondering if it's possible to create, say, a studio, which is a building, right, made of mesh, and somehow have, before you upload it, being able to put interior components in it that allow it to communicate with duplicates of itself, regardless of which platform they're on. So it wouldn't be about going to high fidelity and science space and telling them to make things compatible with each other. I would do it in the objects before I uploaded it to each platform. So let's say the studio had a telephone on the wall, a video telephone or something. If I was in Spine Space, I could pick it up and I could ring the studio that's in OpenSim, or ring the studio that's in High Fidelity, or ring the studio that's in Second Life. Now you can do that offline already by making a Skype call, if you see what I mean. But I'm quite interested in a whole back end that could be maybe somehow included in a mesh object. The mesh object would obviously have its collision mask and its visual mesh. So the two forms of mesh would create the visual object and stop you walking through walls and things like that. But then some of the objects inside the build would actually be interactive objects that would, I don't know, maybe they'd operate with JavaScript or other protocols that are commonplace throughout the different worlds, platforms, or the web or whatever. So you will be able to use, you'd be able to create your own interoperability between the various copies of what you created and rested in different worlds.
Yep.
That I'd love to see as at least a makeshift way of bringing about more interoperability.
It may come to
Uh,
pass. Yep.
yeah, I think it could come to pass. You know,
Hmm.
it depends on longevity of different platforms and things. My biggest dread, of course, is the other way around. Is that I think OpenSim and the Hypergrid will be around for a long, long time because there's nothing else like it. But my biggest dread is some kind of juggernaut like Facebook is going to come in and buy up and flatten everything in its way, and then basically take it. You know, we will have interoperability because it will be interoperability between everything Facebook. It's a bit like at the moment you maybe have Facebook Messenger, may have Facebook the program, the network, first social network. You may have Instagram, and you may have WhatsApp, for example. But they all uh, gave us different things at different times, including encryption and stuff like that. But all are now owned by Facebook. And Facebook are now, now they own them all and it's all settled down. They're reneging on their promises and they're actually planning to merge Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram into one product. And then if that works, they'll then incorporate that back into Facebook. So every move they make is trapping you into their ecosystem again and again. And it's the same with Facebook Spaces and all the VR stuff they're planning. You know, you're not going to be able to get in without an avatar account, a Facebook account, and your avatar will be linked to your Facebook thing. It's no wonder they don't want other people's avatars in there because eventually they want your Facebook avatar in your identity and stuff like that. And you know, they're just bloody minded. They're bigger than any government. They think they can do what the hell they want, and by and large they can, as long as they share the information with the CIA. It's just, um, that's what scares me because I don't want to be. I don't want to live in a world where even our virtual reality utility is a corporate owned surveillance state. Rabbit hole.
Yep.
James, you
Yep.
must remind me. I'm sorry, Wild Heart. You've got enough of me today, but whether it's done anything to answer your question, I don't know. But good thoughts indeed. Really would like to see that more of that kind of conversation.
Bigger picture
Yeah.
conversation.
I
Yep.
think most enthusiasts, by the way, like us at the moment, if we're interested in the general thing, I think probably most of us have accounts in Sciencebase, Hypergrid, OpenSim, somewhere, Second Life, High Fidelity, maybe VR Chat, whatever. Um, I very rarely use any of them with any frequency, but I'll tend to use one a lot until the novelty wears off.
Yep.
But I think for some of us, probably those of us most interested in these kind of discussions, it probably wouldn't matter to us whether we held the meeting in OpenSim. Whether we had a weekly discussion in OpenSim or High Fidelity or Sciencebase or whatever, because it would just be a discussion group, and I think most of us would have avatars in each of those worlds if we needed them. But if it was to be something bigger, I don't think you can't ask people in general to have multiple accounts. I mean, I can't get people to use Discord as an alternative to Skype. They maybe download Discord now because they can get the groups and stuff like that. But to me, it's far better than Skype. But no, when we have to have a conference, everybody wants to use Skype because it's ubiquitous, and of course, it will always be ubiquitous as it's owned by Microsoft and packaged in Windows. People don't want another program on sitting hidden under a tray on their desktop, even
Yep.
if it's using no resources. They don't want it there. No, you Skype me. Everybody uses
Right.
Skype. Why
Right.
would I want another program?
Well, Wildheart
even
says
if it's better.
thanks. Wildheart says
Sorry.
thanks. Wildheart
Yeah,
says
I've
thanks.
scared him off now. I've been
Good
talking so much. He's running
and
away.
and good thoughts. Good thoughts. So he says thanks.
Yes, indeed, and thank you for the comments, Wildhouse, and for watching and bearing with me for the reply you didn't expect. Okay, well I think we better call it wrap. So James, did you have any other thoughts on the new stuff? If you can remember all that stuff from half an hour ago.
No, no. I think I'm good today.
Right. Okay. Now, a bit of advance warning, by the way. We will be back same time, same place next week, sort of. Um, we, if we're not delayed, we will simply be. If you watch this live, i.e. Wild Talk, we will be live about 3 hours before normal for technical reasons. So I think what's this 10? What did we say? Yeah, it's 8 a.m. Pacific
Pacific.
instead of
Yeah.
11. Yeah, instead of
Noon.
whatever
11.
it is.
11. Yeah.
11. Yeah, instead of 11 for next week. But anyway, it's sort of the same time, isn't it? So same time, same place next week, and everything else. So from me, it's nah. How do I do this? I've forgotten. It's goodbye from him anyway.
That's right. And it's goodbye from him.
Yeah. So from both of us, ta and have a good week. We'll see you later. Bye bye. I'll come up with something proper like this.